Number: The Quiet Woman in the Corner. The neon lights of GameZone Battle Hub cast an electric blue glow across the crowded gaming arena. Friday night brought the usual crowd of competitive gamers, each hoping to claim their spot as the evening's champion. The air hummed with the sounds of rapid button presses, excited shouts, and the electronic symphony of fighting games echoing from dozens of arcade machines. Sarah Chen sat quietly at Station 12, her fingers dancing across the arcade stick with practiced precision. Her opponent on screen fell to another flawless combo, the victory screen flashing as she remained expressionless. She had been here for 2 hours, systematically defeating every challenger who stepped up to face her. Her plain black hoodie and jeans made her blend into the background. Just another face in the crowd. Most players gave up after one match, shaking their heads in disbelief at her skill level. But Sarah preferred it this way. Gaming had become her escape, a place where reflexes and strategy mattered more than the memories that haunted her sleep. The repetitive motions of combat games helped quiet the noise in her head, the same way cleaning her rifle used to bring her peace during those long nights overseas. Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez noticed her from across the room. At 6'4" with arms covered in tribal tattoos, he commanded attention wherever he went. The local gaming community knew him as the undisputed king of Battle Hub, a title he had held for 3 years running. His custom arcade stick, adorned with skulls and flames, had become legendary among the regulars. "Who's the girl crushing everyone at 12? Tank asked his usual crew, gesturing toward Sarah with his energy drink. "Been here a couple hours," replied Jimmy, one of his followers. "Nobody can touch her. She's running through people like they're beginners." Tank's jaw tightened. He had built his reputation on being the best player in the venue, and seeing someone else dominate his territory didn't sit well with him. The crowd around his usual setup had thinned as people drifted over to watch the mysterious woman play. His pride couldn't handle the competition. "Time to show her how things work around here," Tank muttered, cracking his knuckles. He approached Sarah's station with his characteristic swagger, each step deliberate and meant to announce his presence. The crowd that had gathered to watch her play turned to look at Tank, sensing the brewing confrontation. Conversations quieted as the two local legends prepared to face off. "Nice run you've had here," Tank said, his voice carrying across the immediate area. "But playtime's over. Time for you to step aside and let the real players handle things." Sarah didn't look up from her screen, finishing her current match with another perfect victory. Only after the final hit connected did she turn to face him, her dark eyes calm and unreadable. "Station's open," she said simply, standing up from her chair. "You want to play? Put your quarter up like everyone else." The crowd murmured at her response. Most people in the venue knew better than to challenge Tank directly, especially newcomers. His reputation for aggressive play extended beyond the games themselves. He was known to get physical with people who disrespected him, and the staff usually looked the other way given how much money he brought to the venue. Tank's face reddened at what he perceived as disrespect. He slammed his quarter down on the machine harder than necessary, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the suddenly quiet section of the arcade. "Listen here, princess," he said, leaning in close enough that Sarah could smell the energy drinks on his breath. "I don't know where you came from, but you're in my house now. I've been ruling this place since before you probably even knew what a fighting game was." Sarah remained perfectly still, her posture relaxed but alert. Years of training had taught her to read body language, and everything about Tank screamed amateur intimidation tactics. His aggressive posturing, the way he tried to use his size advantage, even his choice of words. It all reminded her of drill instructors who thought volume was a substitute for actual authority. "You going to play, or just talk?" Sarah asked, settling back into her chair and selecting her character. The question hit Tank like a slap. He was used to people backing down when he turned on the pressure. New players typically apologized and moved to different machines. Veterans who knew his reputation usually offered to buy him drinks to avoid confrontation. But this small woman in the oversized hoodie was treating him like he was invisible. Tank chose his main character, a heavyweight grappler that matched his real-world preference for overpowering opponents. His playstyle was aggressive and relentless, designed to overwhelm people before they could mount any defense. It had served him well against the local competition, most of whom crumbled under sustained pressure. The first round began, and Tank immediately went on the offensive. His character rushed across the screen, throwing heavy attacks designed to crush any opposition. But Sarah's character seemed to dance around his assault, always just out of reach. Her movements were precise and economical, never wasting energy on flashy combos or unnecessary risks. Tank's attacks met nothing but air as Sarah systematically dismantled his offense. Her counterattacks were surgical, each one designed to exploit the exact opening he had created. Within 30 seconds, Tank's character lay defeated on the screen. "Lucky round," Tank muttered, his confidence already shaken. "Let's see you do that again." The second round played out exactly like the first, except this time Sarah's dominance was even more pronounced. She didn't just win. She completely shut down every option Tank tried to employ. It was like she could predict his every move before he made it. The crowd around the machine had grown larger, drawn by the spectacle of Tank's public humiliation. Whispers rippled through the gathering as people pulled out phones to record what might be the end of an era. Tank stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward into a nearby machine. His face was flushed with embarrassment and anger, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You think you're hot stuff, don't you?" he said, his voice rising above the ambient noise of the arcade. "Coming into my place, showing off like some kind of prodigy?" Sarah powered down the machine and stood to face him. Even with the significant height difference, she didn't seem intimidated. If anything, her calm demeanor made Tank appear more unhinged by contrast. "I'm just here to play games," she said quietly. "Same as everyone else." "No. You're here to make me look bad," Tank shot back. "Well, congratulations. You got your moment. Now it's time for you to learn some respect." He took a step closer, using his size to try to force Sarah to back down. The crowd tensed, sensing that the situation was about to escalate beyond a simple gaming rivalry. Several people reached for their phones, ready to call security or the police. But Sarah didn't move. She stood her ground with the same calm confidence she had displayed during their matches. Her eyes never left Tank's face, reading every micro-expression and preparing for whatever came next. "You really want to do this here?" she asked, her voice so quiet that only Tank and the people closest to them could hear. Something in her tone gave Tank pause. It wasn't fear or anger, but something else entirely. It was the voice of someone asking a genuine question, as if she was curious about his decision-making process rather than threatened by his posture. Tank hesitated for just a moment, uncertainty flickering across his features. But his pride had been wounded in front of his followers, and backing down now would destroy his reputation permanently. "Yeah, I think I do," he said. Taking another step forward, Sarah nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when the unstoppable force of Tank's ego met the immovable object of the mysterious woman's composure. The arcade's ambient sounds seemed to fade into the background as two very different kinds of warriors faced off in the neon-lit battlefield of Game Zone Battle Hub. Tank saw an opportunity to reassert his dominance through intimidation. Sarah saw a situation that required careful management to avoid unnecessary escalation. Neither of them fully understood what the other was truly capable of, but that was about to change very quickly. The storm breaks. Tank lunged forward, expecting Sarah to flinch or retreat like every other challenger he had intimidated over the years. Instead, she moved with fluid precision that seemed to defy the laws of physics. One moment Tank was reaching for her shoulder to grab and shake her. The next moment he found himself face down on the sticky arcade carpet, with his arm twisted behind his back, in a position that made his shoulder scream in protest. The entire sequence had taken less than 2 seconds. The crowd erupted in shocked gasps and excited chatter. Phones appeared from every direction, capturing the moment when the mighty Tank had been brought low by someone half his size. Sarah applied just enough pressure to keep him immobilized without causing permanent damage, her knee positioned precisely on the pressure point that would make any escape attempt incredibly painful. "Stay down," she said quietly, her voice carrying no emotion beyond simple instruction. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Tank's face burned with humiliation as he realized the position he was in. His followers stared in disbelief, unable to process how their leader had been neutralized so quickly and completely. The woman hadn't even seemed to exert any real effort. It was like watching a master craftsman demonstrate a simple technique, What the hell? Tank started to protest, trying to leverage his weight to break free. Sarah adjusted her grip slightly, and Tank's words turned into a sharp intake of breath as pain shot through his shoulder and elbow. He had been in enough fights to recognize when someone had complete control over his body, and this woman definitely qualified. "Security's coming," someone in the crowd called out. Sarah glanced up to see two arcade employees pushing through the gathering crowd. Both men looked nervous about intervening in what appeared to be a very one-sided confrontation. The taller of the two, a manager named Pete whom Sarah had seen earlier, approached with his hands raised peacefully. "Okay, let's all just take a breath here," Pete said, his voice shaky with adrenaline. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to let him go, so we can sort this out." Sarah looked at Tank's position, evaluating whether he had learned his lesson or if releasing him would simply restart the confrontation. His breathing was heavy with pain and anger, but she could feel some of the fight going out of him as reality set in. "I'm going to let you up," she told Tank directly. "You're going to walk away and cool off. We clear?" Tank's pride wanted to reject any deal, but his practical side recognized that struggling further would only add to his public embarrassment. He managed a grudging nod. Sarah released the hold and stepped back smoothly, creating distance while keeping her hands visible and non-threatening. Tank rolled over and climbed to his feet, rubbing his shoulder and avoiding eye contact with the crowd that had witnessed his defeat. "This isn't over," he muttered, loud enough for Sarah to hear but quiet enough to maintain some dignity. "Yeah, it is," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "Go home, Tank. Sleep it off." The use of his nickname caught Tank off guard. Most newcomers didn't know his reputation or the local hierarchy. But this woman had not only defeated him physically, she had done it with the casual confidence of someone who had faced much more dangerous opponents than a small-town gaming bully. Pete stepped between them, trying to restore some semblance of order to his establishment. "Look, I don't know what happened here, but fighting is grounds for permanent banning. Both of you need to—" "I didn't fight anyone," Sarah interrupted calmly. "Someone got aggressive. I defended myself. Check your security cameras if you want confirmation." Pete looked around at the crowd, many of whom were nodding in agreement with Sarah's assessment. Tank had clearly been the aggressor, and Sarah had simply ended the situation as quickly and safely as possible. "Tank, maybe you should head out for the night," Pete suggested diplomatically. "Let everyone cool down." Tank's face cycled through several different emotions as he processed the suggestion. Being asked to leave his own domain was perhaps worse than the physical defeat itself. His eyes swept the crowd, looking for support from his usual followers, but found only curious stares and phone cameras still recording his humiliation. "Fine," he said finally. "But this place won't be the same when I come back." He pushed through the crowd without looking back, his dramatic exit somewhat undermined by the fact that he was still favoring his sore shoulder. The arcade gradually returned to normal volume as the excitement died down and people returned to their games. Pete turned back to Sarah, who had already moved to collect her jacket from the nearby chair. "I'm sorry about that. Tank's usually not quite so direct. You handled yourself well, but I have to ask, where did you learn to do that?" Sarah zipped up her hoodie and slung her small backpack over one shoulder. "Here and there," she said vaguely. "Thanks for keeping things calm." "Wait," Pete called as she started to walk away. "You should stick around, play some more games. On the house, after what happened." Sarah paused and looked back at him. The offer was generous, but she could already feel the weight of curious stares from the other players. Word would spread quickly about what had happened, and the last thing she wanted was to become a local celebrity or urban legend. "Maybe another time," she said with a slight smile. "Have a good night." As Sarah walked toward the exit, conversations followed in her wake. Players who had witnessed the confrontation were already crafting their own versions of the story, each retelling adding new details and embellishments. By tomorrow, the tale would be circulating through the entire gaming community. Outside the arcade, Sarah found Tank leaning against a car in the parking lot, talking animatedly on his phone. His voice carried across the mostly empty lot as he tried to explain the evening's events to whoever was listening. "I'm telling you, it was like she knew exactly what I was going to do before I did it," he was saying. "Nobody moves like that, unless they've had serious training." Military or police or something. Sarah walked past his car toward the bus stop, but Tank's words made her slow her pace slightly. His assessment wasn't entirely wrong, though his understanding was limited. The techniques she had used were indeed military in origin, learned during months of intensive close-quarters combat training that few civilians would ever experience. Tank noticed her walking by and ended his phone call abruptly. For a moment, Sarah thought he might try to restart their confrontation in the parking lot, away from witnesses and security cameras. But when their eyes met, something in her expression convinced him that would be an extremely poor decision. "Hey," he called out as she reached the bus stop. "What's your story?" "Really?" Sarah considered ignoring him entirely, but curiosity got the better of her. She turned around to face him, noting that he maintained a respectful distance this time. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I mean, I've been fighting my whole life," Tank said, his earlier aggression replaced by genuine puzzlement. "Boxing, wrestling, street fights, you name it. I know what good fighters look like, and you're something else entirely." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of continued hostility or attempts at manipulation. Instead, she found what appeared to be honest curiosity, mixed with newfound respect. "I used to be in the military," she said finally, offering the simplest version of the truth. Tank nodded slowly, as if that explanation made perfect sense. "Which branch?" "Navy." "Combat role?" Sarah's hesitation before answering told Tank more than her eventual response. "Something like that." The bus arrived before their conversation could continue, its headlights cutting through the darkness of the parking lot. Sarah climbed aboard and found a seat near the back, watching through the window as Tank returned to his car. As the bus pulled away from Game Zone Battle Hub, Sarah reflected on the evening's events. She had come to the arcade seeking a few hours of peaceful gaming, a temporary escape from the complicated process of rebuilding her civilian life. Instead, she had found herself in exactly the kind of confrontation she had been trying to avoid. Tank would undoubtedly research her background now, probably starting with online searches and moving on to asking questions around the local veteran community. It was only a matter of time before someone connected her face to her service record, and then, her carefully maintained anonymity would be compromised. But for now, she could enjoy the quiet rumble of the bus and the satisfaction of knowing that Tank would think twice before intimidating other players at the arcade. Sometimes the skills she had learned in darker places could be used for something positive, even if it meant sacrificing her own peace and quiet. The city lights blurred past the bus window, as Sarah wondered if she should find a new place to play games, or if returning to Battle Hub would create more problems than it was worth. Either way, her simple evening of gaming had turned into something much more complicated. Number, revelations, and respect. 3 days passed before Sarah decided to return to Game Zone Battle Hub. The familiar neon glow seemed somehow different as she approached the entrance, carrying the weight of her last visit's events. She had spent those 3 days debating whether to find a new gaming venue or face whatever consequences awaited her return. The arcade was busier than usual for a Tuesday night, and Sarah immediately noticed the change in atmosphere. Conversations quieted as she walked past, players recognizing her from the videos that had already spread throughout the local gaming community. The footage of Tank's swift defeat had been shared across social media, turning Sarah into an overnight legend. She chose a machine in the back corner, hoping to avoid drawing too much attention. But within minutes, a small crowd had gathered to watch her play. Unlike the casual observers from her previous visit, these spectators maintained a respectful distance, treating her more like a visiting celebrity than a regular player. Sarah was midway through a particularly challenging match when she sensed someone approaching from behind. She tensed slightly, prepared for another confrontation, but relaxed when she recognized Pete's voice. "Mind if I join you?" Pete asked, indicating the Player 2 side of the machine. Sarah nodded, finishing her current game before starting a new match against the arcade manager. Pete's skills were respectable but clearly recreational level, and Sarah found herself holding back to keep their games competitive and enjoyable. "So," Pete said during a brief pause between rounds, "Tank's been doing some research since Friday night." Sarah's hands never stopped moving on the controls, but Pete could sense her increased attention. "What kind of research?" "The kind that involves calling every veteran he knows and showing them pictures from the security cameras, Pete replied. Turns out he's got a cousin who did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Marine infantry. Sarah executed a complex combo sequence while processing this information. Tank's military connections could complicate things significantly, especially if word reached the wrong people. And? She prompted. And his cousin recognized you, Pete said, pausing his own gameplay. Or at least, he recognized the techniques you used. Said they were too clean and too precise for regular military training. Sarah's character landed a perfect counterattack, but her focus was clearly divided. People see what they want to see. Maybe, Pete agreed. But Tank's cousin used some interesting words. He mentioned something about Tier 1 operators and suggested Tank might want to apologize for starting something with someone way out of his league. The match ended with Sarah's victory, but she made no move to start another round. Instead, she turned to face Pete directly, studying his expression for signs of threat or judgment. What exactly are you asking me? She said carefully. Pete glanced around to ensure their conversation remained private, then leaned closer. I'm not asking anything. But Tank is outside in the parking lot. Has been for an hour. He's been working up the courage to come in and talk to you. Sarah sighed, recognizing that her peaceful gaming session was about to become significantly more complicated. And you think I should talk to him? I think he's learned something about himself over the past few days, Pete replied. The Tank who tried to intimidate you Friday night isn't the same guy sitting in that parking lot right now. Before Sarah could respond, the arcade's front door chimed and Tank walked in. But this was a very different version of the man who had confronted her 3 days earlier. Gone was the aggressive swagger and confrontational posture. Instead, Tank moved carefully, almost hesitantly, scanning the room until his eyes found Sarah's. He approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening, stopping a respectful distance away. The arcade had grown noticeably quieter, as other players sensed the potential for drama. Could I talk to you for a minute? Tank asked, his voice lacking any of its previous arrogance. Outside, if you prefer. Sarah evaluated the request, noting the genuine nervousness in Tank's demeanor. Whatever he had learned about her background had clearly affected him profoundly. Here's fine, she said, gesturing to a nearby seating area away from the gaming machines. They sat across from each other at a small table, the neon lights casting alternating shadows across their faces. Tank fidgeted with his energy drink for several seconds before finding the courage to speak. I owe you an apology, he began. A big one. I was way out of line Friday night. Sarah waited for him to continue, offering no encouragement or hostility. My cousin Marcus served with some special operations guys in Afghanistan. Tank continued. When I described what happened, he got real serious, real fast. Started asking questions about your background, your training, stuff I couldn't answer. Tank paused, taking a sip of his drink before continuing. He made some calls to people he knows. People who know about things I can't even imagine. And what he found out? Tank shook his head. Let's just say I'm lucky you showed restraint. Sarah's expression remained carefully neutral, but internally she was calculating the implications of Tank's investigation. If his cousin had connections deep enough to access classified information about special operations personnel, her anonymity was already compromised. What exactly did he tell you? She asked. Tank hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with sharing information he wasn't supposed to have. Enough to know that you've done things I can't comprehend, places I can't pronounce, missions that probably saved lives I'll never know about. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. He said, the techniques you used on me are taught to people who specialize in eliminating threats quickly and silently. Said you could have seriously hurt me and didn't. Which means you have more discipline and control than most people will ever develop. Sarah absorbed this information, realizing that her carefully constructed civilian identity was unraveling faster than she had anticipated. The question now was how to manage the situation without creating bigger problems. Your cousin talks too much, she said finally. Tank actually smiled at this, the first genuine expression she had seen from him. Yeah, he does. But he also made me understand something important. Which is, that I've been playing tough guy in a sandbox while you've been fighting real wars against real enemies, Tank said seriously. I've been intimidating gamers and college kids while you've been. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Sarah studied his face, recognizing the genuine remorse and newfound respect in his expression. It was a look she had seen before, usually from junior personnel who had just learned about the reality of special operations work. The person you've been hearing about isn't who I am anymore, she said quietly. I'm just someone trying to play video games and live a normal life. Tank nodded emphatically. That's exactly what I want to help you do. The thing is, word's already spreading through the community. People are starting to ask questions, make connections. Your privacy is probably going to be compromised whether we like it or not. Sarah had already reached the same conclusion. But hearing it confirmed still stung. The comfortable anonymity she had maintained for months was evaporating, replaced by unwanted attention and speculation. What are you suggesting? She asked. Tank took a deep breath before answering. I'm suggesting we get ahead of this. Let me make it clear to everyone that you're under my protection here. Not because you need it, obviously, but because you deserve to game in peace, without people bothering you. The offer surprised Sarah. Tank was essentially proposing to use his reputation and influence to shield her from exactly the kind of attention his own actions had generated. Why would you do that? She asked. Because I screwed up, Tank replied honestly. Because I let my ego put you in a position you didn't want to be in, and because someone who served their country the way you have deserves better treatment than what I gave you. Sarah considered the proposal. Tank's protection would come with its own complications, but it might be preferable to dealing with constant speculation and investigation into her background. There would be conditions, she said finally. Name them. No questions about my service. No attempts to research my background further. And if I ask you to back off, you back off immediately. Tank nodded without hesitation. Agreed. Anything else? Sarah almost smiled at the irony of the situation. 3 days ago, this man had been her problem. Now he was offering to become her solution. One more thing, she said. I still get to kick your ass at fighting games whenever I want. This time Tank's smile was genuine and wide. Deal. But I'm going to keep practicing until I can at least make our matches competitive. As they shook hands, Sarah realized that the evening's events had taken yet another unexpected turn. Tank's investigation had destroyed her anonymity, but his guilt and respect had created an unlikely alliance. It wasn't the outcome she had hoped for, but it was better than the alternatives. The arcade gradually returned to normal volume as other players realized the confrontation they had expected wasn't going to materialize. Sarah and Tank returned to their respective gaming setups, but the dynamic between them had fundamentally changed. Over the following weeks, Tank proved true to his word. When curious players approached Sarah with questions about her background, Tank would intervene diplomatically but firmly. When social media speculation about her identity intensified, Tank used his influence in the community to discourage further investigation. Sarah's gaming sessions remained peaceful, though she could never quite recapture the complete anonymity she had previously enjoyed. The trade-off seemed acceptable, especially as she watched Tank genuinely work to become a better player and a better person. Their relationship evolved from adversarial to respectful, to something approaching friendship. Tank never asked about her military service, but his behavior made it clear he understood and appreciated the sacrifices that service had required. Sarah discovered that having an ally in the gaming community, even one she had gained through conflict, made her civilian transition slightly easier. Tank's protection allowed her to focus on rebuilding her life, rather than constantly managing unwanted attention. The battle hub became her sanctuary again, a place where her past remained private and her future stayed focused on simple pleasures like perfect combos and hard-fought victories. Sometimes the most unexpected conflicts led to the most valuable alliances, and sometimes former enemies made the most loyal friends.